All right, I got this video from this small creator here with one simple question. What radicalized you? And I'm sure a lot of you guys feel like you've been quote unquote radicalized or been told you've been radicalized, myself included. Where the true reality of it is radicalization is just thinking like everybody thought for the entirety of Earth, except for the last like 3 seconds. Let's see what this guy has to say.
Over how my current ideology developed, basically how I became radicalized. And I just wanted to share my story of falling down the far right rabbit hole and ending up where I am today. And I'm sure if you're a young guy, a Gen Z guy, you're probably going to relate to this because you probably had a similar experience. So to start, I was born in 2000.
By the way, a lot of Gen Z dudes are leaning right, and not just right, very right. They're extremely conservative when it comes to that. And by the way, the idea of like the far right, that's, when I think far right, I think guys in white hoods, guys with nooses, guys who are doing very, very bad things. Now, the far right is somebody who misgenders somebody. And I'm sure we're going to get to this with this kid.
2001, so I grew up within the Obama era, and I remember just seeing how much society shifted during that time. There was a huge shift towards normalizing LGBT, which happened at this time, and if you are on the younger side of Gen Z, or if you are Gen Alpha, you probably don't remember what the world was really like before woke and LGBT stuff really took over. To just give you an idea of how much things changed, Barack Obama, who seen as like the hero of the Democratic Party and is still loved by a lot of Democrats and a lot of people on the left today, he was originally anti-gay marriage, and while he was president, he was vocally against gay marriage. So just to give you an idea of how much things have changed, I mean, by modern standards, a Republican being against gay marriage is somewhat controversial. So it's really crazy to think about who's basically one of the most beloved Democrat politicians today, having at one point in his career been anti-gay marriage is, pretty crazy to think about. But,
I'm sure most of you guys know the first president that came in actually openly embracing gay marriage. Do you guys, anybody know? If you do know, let me know in the comments.
Society has shifted a lot from that time, and I grew up in New Jersey, and I live in New Jersey right now, and New Jersey is a very diverse state, so I grew up around a lot of multiculturalism, a lot of different races, a lot of different cultures. I obviously, going to school, was kind of taught the usual don't see skin color, we're all one race, and all these things, the standard that the majority of people are taught in school.
Are they still taught that? Are they? Because that was a shock to me that now the message isn't just like, hey, treat everybody equally, treat everybody great. Now it's, no, you must do more. And if you don't do more, you're part of the problem.
Today, so nothing out of the ordinary. However, I will say that I think that my brain chemistry somehow protected me. I think that my brain was just wired in such a way that I was able to really avoid a lot of the more serious brainwashing. And it never really clicked with me like it did with other people. And I'm sure if you are like me, if you're more of a schizo or an autist, you probably are the same way, where you probably attribute a lot of your resistance to the world agendas as simply a result of your brain chemistry. So, that's a pretty universal thing there.
You know what I equate this to is I just don't like being told what to do. I've said this before. I'm a horrible employee. I suck at being an employee. That's one thing I learned after I sold Screw Attack a long time ago. I went to work for Rooster Teeth for 3 years. After the company that acquired us acquired them, I worked for Rooster Teeth. Look, it was a horrible 3 years. Horrible 3 years. It was the worst 3 years of my professional career. But I learned something very valuable, and that I suck at working for other people because I don't like being told what to do. Now, I later worked on with some other companies, and I had a lot more freedom, and that was totally fine. I think that's really what it comes down to is a lot of people who reject kind of the propaganda and the government propaganda, they just don't like being told what to do. They like having their own independent thoughts. They like being able to pursue their own goals, have their own goals, obviously within the structure of helping the company, the government, whatever it may be, or their personal life. But I think that's one of the main things here. And let me know if you're the same.
I will say that I also did have a somewhat more conservative upbringing where my parents never really were overtly political, but my parents were more right-leaning, and they still are today. My grandma is a staunch Republican. She's very, very, very political, and she loves Fox News. She's like your stereotypical conservative boomer, and I think that definitely influenced my mom. And my dad also is just naturally more of a right-leaning guy, probably just because he's a normal straight white guy with testosterone. So both my parents.
Isn't that crazy? Just a normal guy who likes women, who has a little bit of testosterone flowing through his body. It's really amazing how that works out. There's these studies, this data that shows that right-leaning guys have exponentially more testosterone compared to guys who lean left. And I think that is pretty much the main story that you need to know when it comes to strong, manly men versus weak men. And what do they say about weak men? They create weak times and bad times.
Were a bit more conservative, and while they weren't overtly political in the household, their ideas did kind of rub off on me. Like, I didn't like Obama growing up because my parents didn't like Obama. And my dad would always tell me that I should not listen to the teachers when they start talking about politics and all these things, because my dad knew that most of the teachers were left-wing and that I shouldn't listen to them about any of these ideas. So I think that definitely helped. On top of that, I think I've always been more of like an outdoorsy guy. I've always loved my guns. I always wanted to own guns since I was a kid. And I think my first real political opinion that I ever had was just in regards to gun control, where I was always anti-gun control as a kid because, hey, I thought guns were cool, and I thought the idea of owning a gun was awesome and badass, and I'm not going to like the political party that wants to ban the thing that I want to own. So that was really my first real political opinion I ever formed.
What's funny is a lot of people will say, it's not that they want to ban something that I want to own. It's they want to ban something that can protect me and my family. And for him, it's a fun thing, right? But for a lot of people, it's the protection aspect.
Growing up in a very diverse area, you would think from a left-wing perspective that growing up in more diversity makes you less prone to racism. However, I would be a perfect example of why that isn't the case, and I'm going to get more into that, but I also want to talk more about my first real introduction to identity politics, which was, I think, around 2014. I watched this YouTube video of this lady screaming at these guys who were, they were just carrying around anti-abortion flyers or posters. And this video was pretty viral for the time. I don't know if you can still find it on YouTube, but this lady basically harassed these guys. She tore down their posters, and I'm just like, God damn, this lady is crazy. And that was my first introduction to the archetype of the SJW, which at the time...
I've never seen that picture before, but that will haunt my dreams. Thank you for sharing that, young man. I hate that.
They were called SJWs, social justice warriors. I don't know what people call them today, but they were basically your blue-haired...
a plight on society, bringing all society down. Yeah, that's what we call them, yes.
Feminist type of person. And I'm a pretty schizo guy. I believe in a lot of conspiracy theories, and I definitely 100% believe in things like MKUltra and Monarch and these different mind control things that the government did, these programs. And I think that with these SJWs, they are an archetype. And I think that someone literally created the first SJW in a lab. Like, someone was writing this all down on paper. There was a meeting in a boardroom, and someone drew up the first prototype for the social justice warrior. And they just somehow used some kind of occultism or some kind of mass brainwashing to inject this archetype into people and literally brainwash them and turn them into this archetype of person, because all of these SJWs are the exact same person. They all act the same, they all talk the same, they dress the same, they look the same, they have the same sense of humor, they have the same opinions. And look, there are
Whoa. There's no humor. There's no humor when it comes to this, sir. That's racist. That's sexist. That's homophobic. You can't have humor. That's crazy.
Normal people that have left-wing views, but then there are the SJWs. And with the SJWs, it's literally like someone took a copy-paste of one person, just pasted it all over the world, because these are all the exact same person. So, yeah, I do think that this is some kind of, like, extreme mind control going on here. So that was really my...
And I'll tell you this, I think social media plays a big part in that, because you go down these... It's all built around echo chambers. And I think, by the way, I think we do see it on both sides. I know people don't want to hear that. There's the architect, the archetype on the left. There's the archetype on the right. And yes, they do the exact same thing in total fairness. Now, with that said, I think the blue hair is doing considerably more damage than the blue hair with the red hat.
First introduction to identity politics was just watching these videos of these SJWs kind of freaking out online and at protests. And I also started getting into Gamergate because that was a big thing that was going on around this time. This
Ooh.
was when Gamergate was starting. So you had all these feminists critiquing
Speak of the devil. Anita Sarkeesian. Hey, all right, nice.
video games. And hey, I was a gamer, so that annoyed me as well. So I kind of fell into that anti-SJW Gamergate rabbit hole. That was really my first foray into understanding my own worldview and sort of identifying as a conservative. Now at this time, I still kind of considered myself a liberal. I was still pro gay marriage. I didn't really have any opinions on different races. It was really just more so, hey, these SJWs, they're kind of crazy. These feminists, they're kind of crazy. We got to stop these people. They're an annoyance. But I wasn't.
Quick side note: how many people do you think Anita Sarkeesian pushed to the right based off of her actions? And I know that a lot of people will say she pulled people to the left. It was all about the feminism and all that stuff. Great. How many people do you think that saw her and was like, yeah, I don't want anything to do with that, right? And they may have even stayed at the exact same spot, but the people on the left, it's that classic meme of the guy on the right standing in the middle, and then the left continues to move, right? I'm curious. I bet Anita Sarkeesian has done more harm than good. Not in the video game, well, in the video game space in particular, but done more harm for her overall cause.
I didn't have any overtly racist or homophobic or really any kind of like extreme views like that yet. And I'm sure that's the case for most guys at this time, even a lot of older guys. I think this was really kind of the rise of a lot of people's conservative views, and this is when a lot of people started to kind of shift towards being more conservative. But overall, the right was dominated by more of this centrist kind of liberal Republican type of, hey, free market capitalism, anti-socialist, anti-SJW, but not overtly racist or overtly traditionalist or nationalist yet. That would come later for most people, including myself. Now, at the same time that all this SJW insanity was going on, I was also starting to notice that there were a lot of double standards directed towards white people. And I remember in history class, we were being taught about things like colonialism and American imperialism. And it was always like, white people bad, white people did this, white people are terrible. And I remember just asking my teacher, hey, why do we only ever talk about the bad things that white people did? Why don't we?
How quickly do you think he was labeled an ist, a phobe, or part of the problem? I'd be very curious to see what his teacher says right here, because this is one of those things I've talked about this on the show when we during Side Scrollers, where my daughter was, they were learning about slavery in their class, and I was walking her to school, and we were talking about what she was learning, and she was talking about how she was learning about slavery, and she was shocked that slavery didn't start in America. That's how it was presented to her. Slavery was a product of America. In reality, we all know this has been happening forever. And she was like, really? Like, that was, I was blown away by that. And it's important to teach your kids those things. Like, look, this is not just a thing that the evil white guy in the U.S. started, and you provide them with a little bit of facts and knowledge, and all of a sudden things get a little bit more clear. It doesn't take much. Does not take much.
Talk about, the bad things that other groups did. And this was around the time I also started learning about the Soviet Union and the politics around World War II, when I learned that, hey, Joseph Stalin killed millions of people, but we were being taught about the Holocaust for like the 20th time in class. I'm just thinking, like, why are we always taught about the Holocaust, but we're never taught about how the Soviet Union killed millions of people themselves, and no one ever says anything about it? And I started questioning that. And on top of that, a lot of the people around me were starting to get radicalized in different ways. For example, I was friends with this black girl who was a very smart girl. She was...
Why do you think that is? Why do you think those people have been radicalized? Because they were sitting there in class just soaking it all up. That they're listening to the narrative. They're going, oh yeah, absolutely, yeah, yeah.
Very much the opposite of the stereotypical black woman. She was very educated. She was very well spoken. She was very articulate, and she was overall a very sweet and loving person. However, I just remember having a conversation with her during track practice one day, and I don't know what this conversation was originally about, but somehow the topic of race got brought up, and particularly racism. And I remember her just saying that white people can't experience racism. And I think that was really a pivotal moment for me where I just realized, holy crap, there is a double standard directed towards white people. Now, being
That's always been the most insane statement ever. And that's a fairly new thing in the last 10 to 15 years. This idea of privilege and white, like it's so asinine, the idea of that statement by itself. And I can see why him hearing that, like the light bulb went off. It's so broken, such an idiotic statement.
in a diverse community, I was surrounded by kids of different races. Particularly, there were a lot of Koreans in my grade, and a lot of the Korean kids really only hung out with each other. Now, obviously, there were exceptions. I mean, I had Korean friends who didn't fit any of the stereotypes that you would attribute to like an Asian person, but for the most part, most of the Korean kids kind of fell into the stereotype. They were all book smart, they were all nerdy, and they all tended to cluster with each other. And that was the same with the Hispanic kids and the black kids. And the
Well, it's because they're all racist. They didn't want to. They didn't want to be around all the other. Like, see, here's the thing. This is the double standard. They're all hanging out together. Cool, awesome. Just like the goths, just like the nerds, just like the jocks. You gravitate to people that you feel comfortable with, that you're familiar with, that enjoy those things. But I haven't seen this, but I'm just gonna guess that if he was to do that with his white friends, they'd be labeled all the islamophobes and everything else. Just throwing it out there.
funny thing is that for me, I was a white kid, and I looked around, I'm looking like, hey, most of my friends are white as well. And I thought, like, hey, if the white kids ever really just wanted to have their own group, there would be outrage. It would just not be allowed. People would call us racist. So that was another thing that really hit me, was that white people aren't allowed to have their own in-group preference, but Asian people can have that, Hispanic people can have that, especially black people can have that. And I remember just walking around town, and there were parts of the town that were so heavily Koreanized that they didn't even have the store signs in English. So that was another thing as well that really hit me, was the fact that I was literally a minority in this town, in the city, and yet I was being told that I was the oppressor here. Around this time, there was also a lot of controversy with the police and how they were treating black people. There was this whole debate going around of whether the police had racial biases, and the white-on-black violence that was supposedly going on, especially police brutality. That was the big kind of thing going on in the zeitgeist at this time. It was police brutality and racial preference and racial bias in the criminal justice system. And this is before body cams became mandatory. So obviously, fast forward to now, a lot of this police brutality stuff is pretty much gone. And that's because, body cams exist and they're mandatory. And they've showed us the reality about why it seems that black people tend to get arrested at higher rates and tend to get shot by police at higher rates. So
The worst, and this is not a controversial statement at all. The worst thing to happen to that entire movement, the BLM movement, was the body cam. The entire idea of like, oh, the whole, white cops are shooting black guys, and like just simply having body cams to the point to where there's talks that apparently they're trying to get rid of that now because it destroys the narrative. It's awesome. More accountability. By the way, I think there should be cameras in classrooms. I think there should be cameras. Like I love the idea of having me being able to see what my kids up to on a day-to-day basis, specifically when I'm trusting a teacher with teaching them on a day-to-day basis. I love that idea. I know some people are not fans of that idea, but I love that idea. I think that's really good. Now, I'd say this right now. I've talked to many teachers. They hate that idea. They hate the idea of being surveilled. To be clear, I don't like the idea of being surveilled either, but you are being trusted with lots of people, lots of people's kids, and the growth of those kids. So I want to have at least an idea of what is happening in class on a day-to-day basis. And I don't really see a whole lot of downside of that, right? Something bad happens in class. Well, you pull up the tape. The teacher said this. Oh, really? Pull up the tape. The student said this. Cool, pull up the tape. What's the downside there? Maybe I'm just totally off base, and I probably am, but yeah, I love the idea of body cams just wrecking the entire narrative here. This kid, it seems like he's simply observing facts. He's observing what's in front of him, and that's what's quote unquote radicalized him, just by observing the truth of the matter.
Obviously, nowadays we know the truth about that, but at the time, that was a really hot issue. And that was one of the first political issues that became really widespread in my grade. I was in middle school at the time. And I just remember this white girl who, she was actually my first crush ever. I first had a crush on her in 5th grade. And she was a very beautiful girl. She had red hair, very attractive. And her story was just really tragic because she was hit really, really hard by the white guilt, by the self-hatred, to the point where she almost exclusively dated black guys. And she would literally post on her Instagram saying how much she hates her ancestors, that she wants to have kids with a black guy just to spite her ancestors. Like, she was really, really, really brainwashed. And
this is a middle school kid. A middle school kid is posting about these things. How much has to hit you for you to be saying these things in middle school? How much and how quick? Man, she must have been hit over the head by this.
She definitely had some other mental illnesses, but it was really sad. And I just remember having an argument with her about the whole police brutality thing. And holy crap, bro. It was really a moment of clarity where I realized that white people are being brainwashed, man. Like, we're being brainwashed to hate ourselves. And most of the girls in my grade, most of the white girls definitely fell for that anti-white brainwashing. They were all like feminists. And a lot of the white girls in my grade became like snow bunnies. They were all dating black guys, like ghetto black dudes and shit. It was gross, man. And I had to go through that and experience that. And, this was around the time I started getting into a more racial worldview. And this was also around the time that Trump was on his way to getting elected. And for most of the time that I'd known about Trump, I wasn't a big Trumpian. I was kind of like, this guy's a little bit too crazy for me. But after experiencing the insanity of the left and how extreme the anti-white brainwashing had become, suddenly Trump looked like a savior. And I just fell in love with the guy. And obviously most people at this time, most like conservative guys, were big on the Trump train. And this was when a lot of guys started to sort of shift to the right, was during this time. And I just remember when Trump won that was like, oh my God, dude, that was really a day to remember. Like, I woke up that morning and I skipped to school. Like, I was so happy when Trump won. And
I'm curious if he was talking about the first time he won or the second time he won. There's a big difference between the two. Me politically, like I said, I've never been a super political guy, which is crazy. I know people go, oh, you do politics all the time. No, I just talk about life, right? And there's these topics that are thrown in front of us and that we talk about things that affect me, that affect our audience. And for me, 2016, I was not super aware of what was going on. For me, the big aha red pill wake up moment was obviously COVID. The 2020 was the big year. It was what happened with COVID, what happened with that summer, the summer of love. It happened with my business at the time and me being booted out for saying, hey, you should treat people good, right? Treat everybody the same. And I was told that's not good enough by, once again, young, stupid, silly white girls. And I got booted out of my company for that. Like, people go, what radicalized you? Well, things like that radicalized. It was a bunch that happened really quick. And once again, I'm not radicalized at all. I would say the people who live in an obsessive relationship with race, they're the radical ones. I think that you should treat everybody equally. I follow the old MLK guidelines of like, hey, I'm going to judge you by the content of your character, right? And whether you're white, black, gay, straight, trans, whatever, look, the vast majority of the time, unless you give me a reason to, I'm going to look at you as a person. And but I do think there are character issues immediately when it comes to certain things happening in society, which means I really have no interest in associating with you because you are a Looney Tune. You have been brainwashed. You have been radicalized. So I don't have a whole lot of that. And I know this because there are things that have been done, people that I know that have gone off the entire deep end, that if they were to speak to themselves from 10 years ago, they would say, who are you? Who are you? How can you possibly believe what you're saying right now? And they would say, well, I've grown and matured. No. You've changed and been manipulated.
Me and my friends were all smiling and we're like, yo, it was a great time, dude. It really sucks because it really felt like we were witnessing a revolution here. But, over the next 2 years, I started to learn about white replacement and the mass immigration going on into Europe and all the sexual violence that was going on in Europe and these car bombings and all the terror attacks, like the migrants were driving cars into people during Christmas, and all that stuff. And that was really when I think I really kind of finalized my worldview and really became the person I am now. But it really is just amazing to see how it all started, and I really think that my path is not an unusual one. I think that most people kind of went down a similar path where you kind of just started out as kind of a normie centrist, and just the more and more the world began to change, the more and more you began to realize that this centrist worldview isn't working, and that this whole idea that we're all compatible, it just isn't working. And it sucks because I really wish things could have been different. I really wish that everyone could just get along, but the reality is that we can never go back to how things were, and we never will. And the more I just look back at that time, the more I just feel like, man, I just really hate the people in power for what they did to my people and really what they're doing to everyone.
All right. Well, there you go. I'll tell you what. I'll put a link to his description, link to his channel down below. There's a lot there. The guy's name is Artorius Rex, and I'll put a link to his channel below. I would love to hear your thoughts on this. This was him giving his personal thoughts. And one thing he said at the very end, he said, I know that my story is not alone. And the data backs that up. We see stories like this that say, like, hey, America's young men are shifting right over here. This is courtesy of a sports thing, The Ringer. But why do you think that is? It's it's so prevalent that you have to have mainstream news stories about it. So they got to ask themselves, why is that? And they have a pretty good idea why. Anyways, let me know your thoughts down in the description, down in the comments. Got another video for you here. You can subscribe right here.